And at 10, Pokemon Forgotten Yellow. After visiting my local GameStop, I had picked up 3 games at random out of the old Game Boy Games bin. After work, I took a better look at them and noticed that they were all kinda messed up. They each had a different color. The Pokemon Yellow cartridge was red. I took it and brought it inside, and luckily my Game Boy still worked. I selected a new game, however the actual game that loaded was the previous owner's save. A text box appeared with Professor Oak's name even though he wasn't around. He was talking about rain. And then that Jeff had blacked out, but this wasn't my save. How did it know my name? The character was named Arnold. The screen faded to black and I shut the Game Boy, but I could still hear Oak singing about the rain. I don't know why you could hear that considering how it was text, but whatever. And at 9, Pokemon Blood. Usually I like finding weird Pokemon games, and recently I found one called Pokemon Red Water. I'm seeing where this is going. But when the game loaded, it was called Pokemon Blood. Yep, there it is. I went to pick up my starter and got my usual selection, but they were all damaged. They had gashes and cuts all over. But I found out while playing that as it took damage, it lost skin. I said to myself that this shouldn't be possible as the game may have been a hack, but it was still using Pokemon Red as a base game, and that game doesn't have these capabilities. But the game heard me. It responded, "You're smart, but not smart enough." I turned the Game Boy off and looked around thinking this can't be happening, but then the Game Boy opened and turned on and said it is happening. I stomped my Game Boy to pieces, but I don't know if I'm safe anymore. And at 8, Pokemon Deadly Y. It was the last day of school and I was screwing around, but then I noticed the Pokemon Y game still in its case laying on the ground. I picked it up and the manual said, "My gift to you, noob." Whoever this noob was had left the cartridge, so I decided to see what kind of terrible team he had because I'm such a pro. The title screen looked terrible. It said press start to die, and the bottom screen had the number 666 along with 2 candles sitting between the numbers. When I clicked start the game, it flashed an image of dead people. I had to play it. I had to see what the hell was going on. His save file was missing, so I made a new one, but Oak was there instead of Sycamore. His face was distorted and he looked like he was going to die. Then he showed me Yveltal puking blood with bloodshot eyes and a bloody nose. Then he collapsed from his injuries. And at 7, Pokemon Bad White version. On September 5th, 2012, I had just gotten Pokemon White version for my birthday. I opened the box and there was no logos on the inside, just a completely white cartridge. I loaded it up and all the colors were diluted, like the saturation had been turned down a lot, but not entirely. There was already a save file with my name on it, and it said 7 hours played, and my Pokedex was nearly full. How in 7 hours could I have done all that, especially when I hadn't loaded the game before? When I loaded the game, I got a message saying leave me alone now, and then my Snivy ended up dying. It flashed a picture that made me sick to my stomach, enough that I could feel my lunch rise to my throat, but I managed to suppress it. A Pokemon battle initiated and it was something I had never seen before. It said it was a Pidove, but its flesh was exposed and torn. It used Screech and that sound was unbearable. It curdled my blood and irritated my skin. Even after closing my DS, the sound kept playing. Only smashing it was the way to end it. And at 6, Pokedeath. What do you really know about Pokemon? Let me tell you, Nintendo lies. I had recently got a copy of Pokemon X, but the start was like black and white, and instead of Zekrom or Reshiram, it was Banette. When the game started, all the NPCs would say either a letter from Banette's name, death is from the doll, or ask me to borrow an escape rope so that they could hang themselves. Dude, just get a noose on Amazon. At least they asked politely. If I gave them one, a live action scene would play showing them doing it. If I said no, they would say screw you, won't you let me escape from living in this hell? Professor Juniper was not at her lab, only a grave in her spot. It said that the world was being destroyed by the doll, and it told me to take one of the Pokemon to kill it. I picked Oshawott and walked out of the lab. I was instantly put in a battle with a level 100 Banette. It bullet punched my Oshawott and sent it flying off screen. And then, it turned its gaze to me. And at 5, Charizard! I know you're looking at me weird, but please don't. I'm not meant to look like this. I used to be so happy. My friend loved me so much, but he would always hang out with his Charizard instead of me, since it was his starter after all. But eventually, it ended up dying in a gym battle. He cried all day. But he thought that another one would fix it, so he went and got another, but he is already carrying 6. I told him he could put me away for a little. All I wanted to do was see him happy, so he did, but it was a very, very long time. While on the PC I could feel myself warping. It sounds strange, I know, but all I could feel was my skeleton being pushed and pulled in every direction. At first it seemed like there was no point to this, but over time, the others in the PC started doing the same. They each started warping into something twisted. Something we all wanted to be for our friend, our trainer. Eventually, we all warped into variations of the Pokemon our trainer had lost. We were all deformed Charizards combined with our original forms. I used to be a Bulbasaur, now I'm a Charizard. Kind of. And a four trapped in a cave. It was night, the wind was blowing ferociously, so I tried to find a cave. As I did, I saw a light nearby, and I hid to make sure I wasn't attacked, but I saw a terrible sight. A Charizard and what I can only assume was its trainer were nearby. The trainer was on the ground, missing both his legs and an arm, and the Charizard looked terrible. It was crying. I heard the trainer ask his Charizard, who he called Ruby, if she was hungry. She shook her head, but even I could hear her stomach rumble. He insisted that she tell him when she's hungry, since he wants to help, but she continued to shake her head, telling him she wasn't. He told her it was okay as he pet her with his one arm remaining. Ruby hugged him, her eyes getting watery. "Ruby, if you don't eat, you'll starve," the trainer said. Ruby began to cry hard, but her trainer reassured her that it's okay and that she had to eat. The man extended his arm towards Ruby, who stared back at him trying to hold back tears. She reluctantly opened her mouth while the trainer slid his arm between her fangs. "Go on," he says, and she did. The man went to sleep and Ruby cried even harder. The man went to sleep to conserve energy, and Ruby cried even harder because she knew what would happen the next time she got hungry. And at 3, Mount Silver. Years before you meet Professor Oak, he trained Red and got into Mount Silver, but once Red gets there, he isn't heard from again. Oak travels there to see that Red has actually died, but his spirit is still there, and all it says is "help me." Oak tried to find another trainer worthy enough to make it to Mount Silver in order to free Red, the Elite Four is positioned in the perfect place to assure that they are your final test before making the climb. When you finally make it, Red is surprised to see you, but without speaking engages in a climactic battle that wages for an hour. When you finally defeated him, he says nothing, but smiles as he leaves and can finally pass on, not being able to say, but showing you with his smile, "Thank you." And at 2, Flash Caves. We all know that you don't need Flash to get through dark caves, but it certainly does help. However, if you decide to take the dark route, there is actually a trick that works with every Pokemon game. If you walk around for a while, you will eventually find a ladder that isn't actually on the map. It will play the walking downstairs sound 4 times, then ask where you think you are. Then you are transported somewhere. You'll know when you can see, and everything is in black and white. Eventually you'll find yourself a hole in the wall. Go through it and you'll be free, but you won't be able to talk to NPCs anymore. In Pokemon Yellow, your Pikachu follower will become a ghost from the Pokemon Tower, and everything will still be in black and white. The only place you can interact with trainers in Pokemon now is the cave where you use the glitch, and if you try to talk to trainers, all they will say is, "Where do you think you are?" and then you will hear the sounds from before, along with screaming and a thud. Finally, in at number 1, Save Me. After being interested with Lavender Town Syndrome, I got a copy of the original game off eBay just to see if it was real. When I got to Lavender Town, there were no NPCs, just one boy in the Pokemon Tower running in circles. He appeared on every floor, and whenever I interacted with him, he would just say, "Save me." Ghosts in the tower would even turn into this boy, having his cry be actual human crying. Now, I didn't mention this before, but my rival's name was Tyler because it was a suggested option, not because I chose it. But that's weird because this game is in Japanese. I get to the top floor and the room is shaped like a T, and remembering this, I ask out loud if it's Tyler. The child turns around and says yes, save me, then initiates a Pokemon battle, but he never threw out a Pokemon, he just stood there, waiting. I fainted him and all he said was thank you. I fall asleep after what felt like hours, but when I wake up, I'm in a car seat in the back of a car holding a different Game Boy in the parking lot of McDonald's. I get out of the car frantically, leaving the Game Boy there, and I got some change off the ground and used the payphone to call my girlfriend. She cusses me out and says that I should have told her I was leaving. At least she sold that damn Pokemon game I bought for way too much money last year. I had been dragged into the game, and now a kid had just taken my place.
And number 10 is Lavender Town Syndrome. This turn of phrase, also known as Lavender Town Tone or Lavender Town Suicides, is extremely shocking to learn about. Back in February of 1996, when Pokemon Red and Green were released in Japan, they experienced a number of suicides and illness in children between the ages of 7 and 12. Apparently, these suicides came from the high frequencies that were played in the theme music of Lavender Town, and it's rumored that at least 200 children committed suicide, with many others developing illnesses and afflictions. It's known that children have very sensitive hearing, so the developers soon changed the tone of Lavender Town. And to study this phenomenon, the developers created a software to analyze this audio, but when it played, it creates images of the unknown, a character in the game Pokemon. This is a terrifying revelation because that character didn't even appear until later games, and is said to translate to "leave now." Number 9. Buried alive. There are a ton of hacked Pokemon games out there, but this one was actually an intended original script for the game known as the Berryman script. It was initially meant to be a boss, but I believe it was just too freaky for players, especially considering their demographic. And in a battle view mode, the buried alive character looks like a decaying human corpse, and if you happen to lose the battle, the Berryman will say, "Finally, fresh meat." Then he would drag your player into the ground. Following that, the typical game over screen would appear, but in the background, you can see the buried alive character devouring your player. Then suddenly, this creepy soundtrack and animation called Static Mesh would appear. Followed by this disturbing message. What is that even supposed to mean? Like, it's also believed that it may have a similar effect to the lavender tone that I mentioned before. Number 8, Pokemon Lost Silver. After buying a used Pokemon Silver game, this player was weirded out to find the game they continued into from the previous player had 999 hours put into the game, all 16 badges and 99,999 Pokédollars and all 251 Pokemon in the Pokedex. The only Pokemon in the player's arsenal were unknowns that spelled out the word leave, and a Cyndaquil named Hurry. After landing in a dark cave, the player used Cyndaquil's flash to see and soon regretted what they saw. The walls were covered in blood red. The player landed in a new dark room and again tried to use the flash, but then it just said Hurry has fainted. And the unknowns now spelt out the word he died. Now his character was white with bloody tears coming from his eyes. Plus his badge count kept changing. First to 24, then to 32. The unknowns now spelled dying. After engaging in a battle with a Pikachu, his Pokemon didn't say fainted, it said it had died. Then the Pikachu also died. The character even comes across the Pokemon Gold sprite that says goodbye forever. He then appears in a small room filled with graves, and all the gym leaders at the bottom were replaced with skulls. The unknowns then spelled I'm dead. A final text came up on the screen that read RIP, and the player could not escape, no matter what they pressed. It seemed as though this hacked copy was telling a story of a young trainer who, despite his efforts in becoming a Pokemon master, still couldn't avoid death and being forgotten by the next generation. Number 7, Trapped in a Cave. This creepypasta is more sad and disturbing than just scary, but still, it's a good one. It's a tale of a player who comes across a horrible sight in a cave. The only light seemed to be coming from the tail of a Charizard named Ruby. Ruby was with her trainer, but something was wrong. The trainer was missing his arm and both legs. Ruby appeared to be sad and afraid. The trainer repeatedly kept asking the Charizard if it was hungry, but Ruby denied, but its rumbling stomach told another story. The man insisted, eventually placed his arm in between Ruby's fangs. Eventually, the Charizard closed its eyes and bit off his arm, leaving only a head and torso. Eventually, the trainer falls asleep and the Charizard keeps crying and crying, as if it knew what was going to happen next when it got hungry. Number 6, Abandoned Loneliness. This creepypasta revolves around a hack copy of Leaf Green, given to a friend and begins with an EV called Loneliness, except the E in Loneliness is missing for some reason. And at the beginning, the player's name is Leaf and follows a number of very strange events and signs that take place in an area called Emptiness, not Pallet Town. After exploring, the player notices that this town is filled with these NPCs that appear to look like ghosts with blood coming from their eyes. The ghost constantly gives strange and evil advice to the character as they progress through the game. As fog covers most of the landscape, the player notices the tiles on the ground spelling out cryptic messages. One of the ghosts even says, "Can't you do better?" The signs and ghosts continue to warn of a friend who betrayed loneliness. Leaf even sees the game's rival Blue pleading to not believe the ghosts and to run before they get you. The player finds out that Blue abandoned loneliness, and after several creepy messages, including one from Brock who said the ghost tricked him, the player shuts off his game. Months later, he picks it back up again, but everything is different. His character is called Sorrow, and his Eevee is a different Pokemon named unwanted. He eventually enters into a battle with a wild Eevee named Loneliness, and when he defeats it, the player turns into one of those ghosts, and is now said to be cursed as well. Suddenly, he's in Pallet Town again, where Red and Blue say that Leaf got the brunt of the curse. He interacts with a signpost nearby, and it just says, "Loneliness was put to rest. R.I.P." Number 5. Disabled. So far, a lot of these creepy things coming from the Pokemon series have a lot to do with strange sounds or frequencies, and this one's no different. Our player in this story was absolutely in love with two characters, Jigglypuff and Wigglytuff. When she buys Pokemon Soul Silver, she immediately sets out to capture a Jigglypuff. This takes some time though, but eventually she manages to catch one in the Safari Zone. No matter how high she leveled her new Jigglypuff, she always kept her sing attack because, well, she loved to hum along to the tune. Still set on getting her second favorite Wigglytuff, but understanding how difficult it was to even find Jigglypuff, she decides to put a high level Pokemon on the wireless trade board in hopes of someone trading a Wigglytuff. And well, she gets her wish, and someone trades her, but oddly the Pokemon is called Disabled in all caps. It has one move, Sing. Before entering into a battle with her new Pokemon, she loads up a couple TMs like Hidden Power, Swagger, and Explosion. She enters into a battle with her new Wigglytuff, but for some reason, Sing is disabled. She tries using Hidden Power for Wig, but it fails. She tries to run, but it fails. The words "wants to fight" comes up on the screen. Then, it gets weirder. Wigglytuff begins doing its own actions. Repeatedly, she sees "disabled" try to use Sing. Sing was disabled. Again and again and again this happens. The enemy suddenly appears sick, as if poisoned, and then flees from battle. But Wig doesn't stop. The text box fills the screen. Disabled use struggle. It struggled. Then more, saying, "Why can't I sing? Sing. Sing." The word "sing" now is flooding the screen. Then randomly an option appears saying, "Can you sing? Yes or no?" The player hits no several times, and suddenly the speakers let out a large, loud screeching noise, causing the player to drop her DS. Having enough of this weirdness, she tries trading the Wigglytuff, and when a trade appears, she hits yes several times, begging for it to hurry. When the trade goes through, it was for a Cyndaquil. Its name was Hurry. Number 4. Strangled Red. This creepy hacked game of Pokemon Red was found in a trash bin of all places, and it tells the story of a trainer named Steven and his best friend, a Charizard named Miki. Oddly, when the player starts up the screen, it just reads Pokemon Strangled Red version. Realizing it was a hacked game, he plays anyways. Although, it won't let him continue with the previous player's game, so he hits new game. The player's name was automatically set to Steven. He starts with a single Charmander named Miki, and everything about this game was just a bit different. His character had a smirk and long hair, his rival was actually his brother, and the starter bedroom had 2 of everything. The game played normally, just the storyline was different. Using the Charmander, it quickly evolved into a Charizard by level 25. As soon as the player reached Lavender Town, things started to get weird. He entered into a battle with his brother Blue, and once they were successful, they had a dialogue back and forth at the house that was strange for a solo game. The NPC wanted Steven to trade him his Charizard Miki. After the no button wouldn't work, he reluctantly hit yes. That's when the game froze mid-trade. He turned it off, and when he restarted, the only option was continue, except he didn't have the Charizard and was greeted with a text box that read 1 year later. When he checked his menu, the character was different. Its eyes were blank, the smirk was gone, and his long hair looked messy. Also, Miki was dead. The player pieced together that this character named Steven is actually the previous champion that then becomes your rival in other games. The town seemed to mourn his loss, with almost presenting him with compassion for this disturbed character. And at this point the game takes over, so the player takes Steven to Lavender Town, where all of the NPC trainers seem to ignore him completely, all saying, "Just go. Sometimes dead is best." To read the full story though, and ending as well, look up Pokemon Strangled Red. It's far too gruesome for me to continue from there. Number 3. Braid. This is a creepypasta that is great if you're looking for a good Halloween story to read. It occurs around Ilex Forest and is told in 3 separate narratives that come together to create an unsettling atmosphere. Standing between the player and Goldenrod City, they know they have to enter the forest. An old tale about the history of Ilex Forest involves villagers bringing baskets of food to the edge of the forest, and we learn that it is left there for a witch in exchange of fruitful harvests each year. However, we learn that if they look at the witch while she is using her magic, the blessing will become a curse. This tremendous creepypasta also goes into detail about the leader of the nearby town's daughter and her curiosity leading her to a curse from the witch, trapping her in the forest and thus becoming the voice of the forest. That's why when you enter Elix Forest, you're warned, and even the trees seem to be weeping and moaning, just watching as the witch turns each new helpless child into a gift to the voice of the forest. Number 2. Best friends forever. As much as I enjoy the hacked games and the dramatic stories that people tell using Pokemon locations, this one is especially freaky. It's a tale of a girl and her best friend. That friend was a Torchic named Blue. The player would always play with her real life friend Talia, but when Talia said that she didn't want to be friends with her anymore, the player just transfers that companionship to her Pokemon characters. Playing night and day, one day Talia snatched her Game Boy out of her hand and threw it to the ground, and was about to crush it with her foot before the game just lets out a loud screeching noise. Talia turns pale and runs away, and her friend Blue's stats also change as well, from likes to sleep to angry. And after moving on to new Pokemon games, the player said goodbye to her old friends and started anew with a Mudkip named Red. As she continued to buy new games, she would bring over her best players from previous versions until she remembered she forgot about her old friend Blue. When starting up her old Pokemon Ruby game, a strange message came on the screen that just said, "You promised you wouldn't replace me." This is where it gets weird. Then she begins having a conversation with Blue, where the Pokemon is responding on the screen to everything she says. Then Blue asks if Talia is still mean to her, even saying that it got very angry. The player decides to carry Blue over to the new game, but first, she's asked by her mother to pick up a pie pan that she lent to Talia's mother. The girl runs over to Talia's home, but there's no answer. And when she hears a scream, she runs into the house to find Talia with burn marks all over her body and a knife in her neck. Her parents were also hung in the basement. She finds Talia's little brother hiding, who tells her that they were just watching TV when a loud beeping noise went off, and Talia was just dead. She rushes home, and on her DS is a text from Blue saying, "She was mean to you. She deserved it." She wakes up around 3 AM to a beeping noise similar to the one Talia's brother heard, and it's Blue. All of her Pokemon begin disappearing, and a text appears, "Now we can be best friends forever." Suddenly she wakes up in her bedroom, but she doesn't recognize anything. She runs downstairs to see a lady she doesn't know, and the woman turns and says, "Good morning, honey. You're finally awake. Our neighbor Professor Birch is anxious to meet you." Number 1. Pokemon Black. This is an infamous hacked version of Pokemon. It begins normally, except with a fourth option for a Pokemon being Ghost. If the player selects Ghost, it starts at a level 1, and is only capable of one move, Curse. When the player uses Curse in battle, the screen cuts to black and only cries of their enemy can be heard. Then, when they return, the Pokemon is gone. When they fought against a trainer, the same thing would happen, except each defeat meant a loss of their Pokeball. And once they were gone, the player could actually use Curse on the trainer. This would replace the character with a tombstone. And after defeating the Elite Four, the game changes again, and a text appears many years later. At this point, where all of these stories begin to get creepy, the player ends up in Lavender Town, except this time as an elderly man standing in front of tombstones. In this post-game world, it's just void of any NPCs, with only tombstones where they used to be. When returning to where they started the game, the player learns that every living thing was dead because the player and Ghost had cursed them. Finally, the Ghost character appears, but this time, it's against your player. The old man character only has one move, and it's Struggle. Until almost having no health, the Ghost uses Curse for one last time, attacking the player. The screen then fades to black, and upon rebooting it, the game file was erased. Coming in at number 10, The Shadow. This creepypasta is about a gamer who believes Pokemon are stalking him in real life. After his older brother died, he left behind a lot of his old games, and our protagonist decides to play some of the Pokemon games and even continues from where his brother left off. He notices something a bit weird though. All of the Pokemon in the wild that he came across were Gengars. And when entering into battle with one of them, his Pokemon looked absolutely frightened. He continued anyways, and when trying to catch the wild Pokemon, it failed. Except oddly, a message appeared on the screen that said, "Leave now or suffer." Creeped out by this, he shut off the Game Boy to try to get some rest. And as he was trying to fall asleep, he could hear a demonic laugh coming from the Game Boy. Just as he was about to get up to check it, he saw big glowing red eyes and a shiny white smirk in the shadows of his room. Terrified, he closed his eyes and ran to turn on the lights. But before he could reach them, he tripped, breaking his ankle in the process. That's when he sees his Game Boy light up and a text box appear beside a Gengar that just said,
I guess you chose suffer.
Number 9. Abandoned Polka Doll. This Pokemon creepypasta is an interesting take on what happens when a once beloved Polka Doll gets left behind. It felt like if Toy Story 3 was a horror movie. The story begins simple enough from the doll's perspective of loving its owner and how it was its favorite doll. And as time passed, it became forgotten and it was eventually thrown in the trash. That's when the story takes its dark turn. The doll actually comes to life and seeks out its previous owner. When it arrives at the house where it once resided, it finds a ton of new dolls scattered around the room. It then goes on a rampage, destroying the other dolls and eventually slitting the throat of its previous owner. Number 8. Let Me Serve You. This creepypasta is about a Pokemon event that happened where gamers were given the opportunity to have the Mew character as part of their new event release. The gamer decides to level up the rest of his Pokemon before using Mew, but for some reason, Mew keeps jumping into battle. Even after moving him to the bottom spot several times, he continuously replaces the first Pokemon with a text box appearing that just says, Mew wants to battle. Another creepy part was that no matter what he tried, Mew would always say, I want to serve you, let me serve you. And our protagonist was terrified when he restarted his game to find that all of his Pokemon were dead, and their sprites were gray with a red X over the photo. When he tries to leave Mew in a Pokemon Center, his sprite looks angry, and another text box appears that says, you can't get rid of me, followed by Mew playing the death song. This let out a terrible screeching noise, causing the gamer to black out and wake up in his bed. Believing it was all just a horrible nightmare, he picks up the Game Boy to play again, only to be met with a text box next to Mew that said, welcome back, let me serve you. And at number 7, Will I Ever Be Free? This creepypasta is a short, sad, and creepy origin story for the Pokemon known as Yamask. It tells the tale of a Yamask who rested well as a ghost inside of an ancient tomb, only to be tormented by its rebirth. It could remember its past life, even stating that the Pokemon was once human. It despises its new creature-like form that lurks through the night and claims that all it has left is its mask, the mask that represents its face from a past life. It's disgusted by its new life as a ghostly devil that gives its trainer immense power. The author then ends the story tragically with the last line being, my face was once so beautiful, all I could do was stare at the mask and weep silently to myself.
I could never be free.
And at number 6, You Will Join Us. This creepypasta is about a gamer who loved playing Pokemon Gold and worked so hard to build his team up. When his battery drained, he ended up losing all of his saves. And as a result, he moved on to the newer versions of Pokemon, but when Pokemon Heart Gold was released, he was excited to replay a familiar region. And when he starts the game, Professor Elm greets him by name, except he says welcome back. This was odd, but he continued. He would then say, they're waiting for you. At this point, he loses control of his character and is now teleported to Lavender Town, where he sees 6 gravestones, all of which had his Pokemon Gold teammates' names written on them. They rose from the graves except in a more pixelated Game Boy Color version, each one confronting the player that he had forgotten them and left them behind. Then one addressed him by name saying,
We are yours, so if you will not permit us to join you, you will join us.
Immediately after that, his sprite began doing the dig animation, causing the screen to go completely dark. In at number 5, Loss of Purpose. This heartbreaking creepypasta is about the characters in the Pokemon game and what happens when they're left behind. Our protagonist picked up an old copy of Pokemon Red, but noticed that after every trainer or enemy he defeated, they would just say, now I shall stand forgotten. This creepy message was alluding to the fact that once you move on in the game, they remain in place with no real use. Eventually our gamer comes into an odd battle with himself. After losing the battle, the enemy then says,
your purpose has been served. End it all before you exist alone forever.
And when he tried to start a new game, he would only get a message that read,
the dead do not return.
It wasn't until that message that our protagonist realizes the character's fear of a loss of purpose. In at number 4, Whole Again. This creepypasta is about a gamer who was playing Pokemon Black and wished to capture a rare dragon Pokemon that was said to be lurking in the caves. And although along the way he was faced with many creepy signs that warn the dragon needs flesh to survive and to become whole again, he kept seeing this whole again phrasing everywhere he went. He wouldn't come to realize its meaning until he finally battled the mysterious Pokemon. And while in battle, when one of his Pokemon would faint, a piece of them would then now be attached to the enemy's sprite, thus making him whole again. Number 3, The Truth Hurts. This strange occurrence happened when a gamer was playing Pokemon Black and was faced with a creepy as hell Pokemon. When he gets to the final showdown with N, he's faced first with a battle against a wild Reshiram. He knew that his Pokemon weren't adequate enough to defeat this enemy, so he chose to run instead. But to his surprise, a text box just came up that said, "Would you like to give a nickname to Reshiram?" Confused by this, he just names it Truth. And then it was added to his party. Following this, a cutscene showed Reshiram killing N and then using his blood to write the words, "Truth hurts, doesn't it?" In at number 2, it's just a game. This creepypasta is about a gamer who comes across strange shape-shifting Pokemon. And at one point she believes she sees a Clefairy until it suddenly changes into a Gengar. And then the Gengar just lets out an evil laugh before disappearing. Then, while in the rock tunnel, she's confronted by another Pokemon who at first appears to be an Onix that soon changes to jet black with glowing red eyes. Fully believing at this point that she may have purchased a hack copy of the game, she continues on to see what else it offers. The dark turn happens when she's faced against an unknown trainer named Aaron, who shockingly resembles her best friend Aaron in real life. And when the battle begins, Aaron first uses a Gengar, and then an all-black Onix, and then her final Pokemon was the Buried Alive character. That's when the Aaron character begins to decay like the Buried Alive character, and as the screen flashed red, she threw her Game Boy aside to call her friend. Her friend Aaron tries to calm her down, saying it's just a game. So once she's calm, she returns to the Game Boy to see the Aaron trainer on the screen, facing her, with the text box that said,
"It's just a game, right?"
Lastly, at number 1, Life Force. This creepy tale is about a sinister Litwick. A trainer and her Pokemon were traveling through a dark cave when they saw a flickering light in the distance. The Litwick approached and agreed to help guide them through the tunnel. What they didn't know was that Litwick would be slowly draining the energy from her Pokemon. And when her Dewott finally fainted and died, she desperately tried to reach for a Pokeball to assist her, but Litwick wasn't having any of that. The Pokemon then knocked her down onto the ground, and as her energy was rapidly fading, a text box appeared on the screen that said,
"Death shines like a candle."
In at number 10, Battery Ditto. This creepypasta was written by an unknown author on the Creepypasta wiki page. It's a story about how Team Rocket was experimenting on Dittos, using several of them to try to create a new Pokemon. They would keep them in cramped cages wired with electricity, and if they ever made a peep, they would be shocked almost to death. One night a security guard was falling asleep, so he released his Arcanine to watch over them. When he woke up from a loud scream, he discovered that a Ditto had bred with the Arcanine. After several weeks of the Ditto not changing back to its original shape, the dark looking Arcanine gave birth to an egg. When the egg finally hatched, it was a Pokemon that they then called Houndour. With this new discovery of birthing Pokemon, Team Rocket rapidly began trying to replicate the process, torturing the Dittos as they went through it. And while some results were successful, most led to the death of many Pokemon. Word traveled fast, and soon the lab was destroyed, releasing all of the trapped Dittos and the newly created Pokemon. However, this did not stop Team Rocket. They continued torturing any Ditto that they could find, and still, to this day, are attempting to manipulate them. There is no end to the mutations that they can force on those poor battery Dittos. And at number 9, Mewtwo. This creepypasta story is based on an original tale found on tumblr.com. It's about a gamer who picks up a copy of Pokemon Blue, and when he begins playing, a Mewtwo starts stalking him. Every time he entered into the grass, he would be thrown into a battle with a level 70 Mewtwo. And at the time, all of his Pokemon had very low levels, so sure enough, the Mewtwo made